Good morning. We are on the record. This is the digital video deposition of 30B6 witness for County of Orange, Bob Abair, testifying in the matter of B.R. et al. Versus County of Orange et al. Case number 815CV00626, CJC PJW. Today we are located at 19301 Campus Drive, Santa Ana, California. Today's date is January 6, 2016. Time on the video monitor is 10:02 a.m. My name is John Emmel, video specialist with Jordan Media Inc., 1228 Madison Avenue, San Diego, California. Will counsel please introduce yourselves for the record?
Sean McMillan appearing for plaintiff.
Mark Ancorn appearing for the plaintiff as well.
William Halleck appearing for defendants County of Orange and Maisha Hammond.
And just so the record's clear, present with us from my office is Travis Cox.
And the reporter may swear in the witness.
Will you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly state the testimony you shall give in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Is it Mr. Abair?
Abair.
Okay. Can you do me a favor and spell your name for the record?
It's Bob Abair, and it's A-B-A-I-R.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For some reason, I had it stuck in my head. It was a D, not a B. I apologize. Okay. And you, let me just show you this. We'll mark it as exhibit number 1 to your deposition. And I believe I've got an extra copy for you. And it's titled Notice, or rather Plaintiff BR's amended notice of deposition of person most knowledgeable for defendant County of Orange pursuant to FRCP Rule 30B6 and request for production of documents. My question is, have you seen this document before?
Yes.
Okay, when?
I saw this, Mr. Halleck, about 2 weeks ago, approximately 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And am I correct that you are or have been designated as the county's person most knowledgeable under FRCP Rule 30B6 to testify about certain of the matters that are identified in this amended notice?
Yes.
Okay. If you can open Exhibit 1 to page 3 and identify for me which of those categories you are the designated person to speak on behalf of the county.
Category number 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Category number 2.
So only category number 2?
Yes.
Okay. And somebody else, just to make sure I understand, somebody else will be testifying as the voice of the County of Los Angeles for categories number 1, 3, 4, and 5?
County of Orange.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say Los Angeles? Tells you where my head has been. Let me just redo that whole question. Am I correct then that somebody else will be testifying as the voice of the County of Orange for categories numbered 1, 3, 4, and 5?
That's correct.
Okay, and do you know who that person will be?
It's for policies and procedures, it will be Martin Rhea.
How do you spell Rhea?
R-A-Y-A. And for the systems, will be Linda Ross. Linda Ross.
And is that L-Y-N or L-I-N?
I believe it's L-Y, but I can't be sure.
Okay. And it's Ross, R-O-S-S?
Yes.
Okay. CWS, Okay. So let's start with a little bit of background before we start digging into the documents I've got here today. Some of the stuff that I have is actually training, or appears to be training materials, and you can verify that for me as we go through it. And some looks like it might be the policies that sort of drive the training. And if at some point we start getting into stuff that you don't really feel comfortable talking about, be sure to let us know that.
Will do.
Okay. So let's start with your background. How long have you worked for Orange County?
Worked for Orange County for 19 years, for Social Services Agency, Children and Family Services for 10 years, and then 9 years, the last 9 years, have been with Training and Career Development.
Listen to the question, answer the question.
Okay.
Okay, so we have, make sure I got this right, 19 years total with County of Orange. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The first 10 years of that was with Children and Family Services?
Yes.
Okay, and then you also said, I think, I wrote down SSA.
It's the division, it's a different division,
Okay.
and that's where Training and Career Development is.
Okay, so Training and Career Development is a subdivision of the Social Services Agency?
Yes.
Okay. And in Training and Development, do you train on more than just the CWS, CMS materials?
Yes.
And by you, I mean you personally?
I don't train personally. And as a manager, I don't train personally.
Okay, that gets us to our next question. Presently, as of today, what position do you hold?
Administrative manager, and so that's my position as administrative manager.
So that administrative manager of a unit or group or department?
A unit.
A unit, okay. What does your unit consist of, the unit that you manage?
There's 6 senior social services supervisors, also known as Quad S's. And 5 of those Quad S's are children and family service trainers. And 1 Quad S trains our adult services.
Okay. And just so that I'm clear, by administrative manager, you essentially supervise and oversee what all 6 of these Quad S's are doing?
Correct.
Okay. Do you participate in the formulation of training materials?
I do.
What role do you play?
My role is to help coordinate the development of it, to bring my trainers together, to assess what the material is, and to help in the development and then delivery of the training.
Okay, coordinate development of training. What does that mean?
Whenever we assess a need from Children and Family Services, our team gets together, a training need. Mm-hmm. Our team gets together and I coordinate the meetings and whoever we need at the table to develop the particular training material.
Okay. And how do you come to understand, when a training need arises?
We meet regularly with the Children and Family Services director and deputy directors and managers on a quarterly basis. And in those meetings, those needs are presented to us.
Okay. In those meetings, do you guys also cover, well, let me back up a little bit. I presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your trainings are in large part sort of driven by policy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, for example, if there's a policy that says you can't grab a child unless you go get a warrant first in the absence of exigency, that would be the policy around which you develop your training.
That's correct.
Okay. And you recall at some point in time ever developing training on that issue, on the requirement that the county obtain a court order or a warrant before seizing a child where there's no immediate danger?
I do.
Do you recall when that happened?
I can't recall specifically. I can only say it was within the last 2.5 years.
Okay. Okay. And I didn't give you a lot of admonitions as we got into this thing, and I usually don't because I find that most people, intuitively know how the process goes, but there is one admonition that I'll give you, and it's not really an admonition, it's just sort of an explanation, that from time to time I may ask you a question that you may not know the exact answer, but you were there, you had personal experience with it, so you have an inkling or an understanding of roughly what the event was or when it happened or how many, if we're talking about numbers, how many, that sort of thing. And we're entitled to your best estimate.
Okay.
And it's perfectly fine if you preface it by saying, well, this is an estimate, and then give it. That's perfectly okay.
All right.
So going back to my original question about when it was that you recall first being involved in the development of can we call it a warrant training? What did you guys call it?
It was, the warrants were actually part of the training. It was a training that involved our court processes, and at that training our county counsel is a co-trainer, and so that is at that point, my best estimate is 2.5 years ago,
Okay.
where we started training the need for warrants before a child is removed.
Okay. And again, that's your best estimate. It could be plus or minus 6
Yes.
months or so. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. If you recall, who was the county counsel that helped you out on that as a co-trainer?
Carolyn Frost.
Carolyn Frost. She's been around for a while, right?
Yes.
And how long was it that you've been an administrative manager in training? Has it been the whole 9 years?
No, it hasn't. It's only been 2.5 years.
So about the time that you were rolling out this warrant training is when you became an administrative manager?
Correct.
Okay. Was that one of your first assignments as a administrative manager for the training unit, was to assist in developing this warrant training?
It was one of my. It was one of the new things, that new legislation that was coming down. So that was one of the first things that we were looking at.
Okay.
Yes.
And when you say legislation, you mean actual statutes, correct?
Statutes. Yes. Correct.
Was there any other that you know of? Was there any other reason why this warrant training was being rolled out about 2.5 years ago, besides legislative changes?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
What other?
Okay. As part of your role in developing or coordinating the development of training, is it your practice before you sit down in your group to familiarize yourself with the issues that gave rise to the need for training?
It is. Yes.
Okay. And what steps do you normally take to do that?
We consult. We consult with subject matter experts such as our county counsel, our policy development unit, Children and Family Services management or deputy directors. So anyone that would have special knowledge in the area, we consult with, and we meet with, and we gather the material.
Okay. And do you remember? You may not, but do you remember any of the people that you met with as part of that preparatory effort in relation to developing this warrant training?
Developing the warrant training was with Carolyn Frost. That's specifically who I remember meeting with.
Okay. And do you recall whether or not she provided you with any written materials? Whether they be email, paper documents?
I don't recall.
Okay. Where would you go to look if you wanted to, go back to your office and figure out whether or not she gave you any documents related to preparing this warrant policy training?
I could go back to my files in that particular area to see if there was any correspondence or any material. She did show us, myself, the lawsuit or the statutes that were pending. So she provided that to us, and she also does the training in that area. So a lot of that's her own material also.
Okay, so there was some overlap between independent material and material she had developed on her own?
That's correct.
Okay. You said that she showed you some lawsuits and some statutory material, right?
Yes, I mean she showed me to my recollection she showed me the statutory material that that brought us to the point of having warrants.
Got it. And when you said lawsuits, what were you referencing?
I believe, and I could be merging two cases, but this came out of a lawsuit in LA County.
Do you recall the name of that lawsuit?
You know, I do recall the KDA lawsuit, and I know that had a lot of mental health issues, but I also believe it was during that time where the warrant issue, not only for Orange County but statewide, was being looked at.
And when you say KDA, that's the letters KDA.
It's KATIE, the name,
Oh,
the
okay,
child's
the name
name.
of the child.
Yeah.
That was a class action, correct?
Yes.
And just so that we all are sort of on the same page, that the allegations in that case revolved around the administration of psychotropic medications to dependent children.
That's correct.
Okay. Were there any other cases that were presented to you in your preparation of this warrant training?
I'm not familiar with any names.
Okay. But there may have been other cases.
There may have been.
Okay. Do you recall how many?
I recall it was not many. It was maybe a couple that kind of prodded this.
Do you recall whether any of those cases involved Orange County?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall the statute? You said that she showed you some statutory material and some lawsuits. Do you recall which statutes?
I don't recall.
Okay. So 2.5, 3 years ago, that would have been, what, like 2012-ish?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Prior to 2012, before you were administrative manager, what did you do at the training unit?
I was one of the staff development trainers, one of the Quad S's, training for Children and Family Services.
Okay, and what was your role in that capacity up until the point that you took over management of the team?
I provided training for Children and Family Services, senior social workers, supervisors, in a variety of different areas.
What areas?
Court-related areas. I also did train CWS CMS. I also trained in the areas of using difficult engagement with your clients.
Oh, difficult clients.
Difficult clients, yeah.
Okay. Did you participate in developing any training in relation to engaging with difficult clients?
I did.
Okay. I think I may have actually seen some of your work product in other cases. That's why it was particularly interesting to me. Any other training areas that you worked with while you were at Quad S?
Right.
Right.
A lot of court-related training. I trained with Carolyn in those years. So it was that training which involves testimony. It involves the court processes. It involves many things that through trial work practice. So I did that. CWS CMS. Some of the other computer programs were like Safe Measures. And just in those areas, those are the areas that I kind of concentrated in.
Okay. And am I correct that would have been from approximately 2006 to 2009 when you were promoted up to the administrative manager? So about 3 years, or would it have been more, 2003 to 2009?
It would have been 2006. It would have been. I started at Training and Career Development as the Quad S in 2006.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then in 2009, roughly, is when you were elevated to the administrative manager?
Actually, that was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah,
so
you know
that's
what? Bad math. My bad. Sorry. So it would have been like
2013.
Yeah. 13. Okay. And during the 6 or 7 years that you were a Quad S, that's when you trained on court processes, CWS, CMS, how to deal with difficult clients, and the various computer programs that the agency uses.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about court processes.
Okay.
During the time period that you were a Quad S, did you participate in developing any training related to court processes?
I did.
Okay. And then you also participated in administering that training, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What are we talking about when we say court processes?
Everything from the overview of the court process in terms of juvenile dependency law. When a child comes into juvenile dependency, the system, from the hotline to permanency, whatever that is, we developed a training. Carolyn and I developed a training that put the timeline together, and it was an overview of the juvenile dependency process.
Was there a name affixed to that training?
You know, there was, and I can't recall I have a couple. I'm trying to think of, because there's been some changes to the title, but I can't recall what specific the title was at that time.
Do you remember roughly, and again, you can give me, this is one of those instances, you can give me an estimate. Do you remember roughly when it was that you rolled that training out?
I can recall training that from the beginning in 2006.
Okay. And if I were to ask you, let me do it this way, what would I call that training material so that you would know exactly what I'm looking for if I sent you a production request?
It would be in the area of juvenile dependency overview.
Okay. And you'd mentioned that there's been some revisions to the training since the materials that you first saw. Do you know how many revisions?
I'm not certain how many revisions. I'm not certain.
Did you participate in developing any of those revisions?
Yes.
And then you also administered some of those revised trainings?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the court process overview, we know that there's a referral hotline, for example, right?
That's correct.
Was your training in that overview package, was there a section in there that related somehow to the referral hotline?
To the hotline itself?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And that had its own little section within the training?
That was the beginning, yes. We started from the beginning.
Okay, the beginning of a case,
Yes,
basically.
that's correct.
If you can describe for us just briefly the steps that you recall being in this overview training, and start from the beginning and sort of give me the flow chart through the end. What are the steps that we're looking at in a juvenile dependency, what do you call it, a case, a referral at the inception? Before
In the inception, from a call, it begins with a call, and then a social worker makes an assessment in terms of how that call is promoted. There are 3 dispositions that can happen. One is that it's information only, so it doesn't rise to the level of abuse. And if that's the case, it just goes to our closed files, but it can be pulled up again if that case comes to another call. The second thing, or just
before we go on to second, I don't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt you, but I had a question about the closed files and information only. Make sure I understand it correctly.
Sure.
Is there will be a telephone call, a social worker will somehow get assigned to investigate the allegations in the telephone call?
not At that point, the only social worker that's making the assessment is the social worker on the phone.
Okay, so the one that receives the call.
That's correct.
Okay, so that social worker, the one that's on the phone, will make an initial assessment about what to do with the call.
That's correct.
Okay, and one of the things that that social worker can do is assess it as an information-only report and then close the file.
That's correct.
Okay. And when we assess it as an information-only report, you'd said that the information is stored so that we can look at it later if we need to or something like that?
That's correct.
Okay. Where is the information stored?
That I don't have. We store those in our closed files, but I don't know exactly where. That would not be in my area of knowing where that's stored.
Okay, let me try it a little bit different way. You're designated here in category number 2 with respect to the CWS CMS system, correct?
That's correct.
What is the CWS CMS system?
The CWS CMS system is a statewide database. So it's a statewide database where
Okay.
all information is stored statewide.
Okay. And I'm going to show you, this may or may not be helpful to you. I don't know, you'll have to tell me. But I'm going to show you what we'll mark as, and she needs to mark it first, then she'll hand it to you and I'll ask you questions about it. But I'll show you what we'll mark as exhibit number 2 to your deposition. And if you can just take a moment, it's what, like 2.5 pages. You don't necessarily need to read it in detail, but just sort of take a look. And I'm going to ask you if you've seen the document before. That's going to be my first question. And just to make it a little easier on everybody, I'm going to be focused on the second headline that's in all bold that says CWS CMS Overview. My first question again will be, do you recognize this particular document as a document that you've seen at some point in your career before?
I recognize it, yes.
Okay. And is the information set out in this document, maybe not complete, but an accurate summary of the CWS CMS system and the purpose behind it?
It is accurate.
Okay. Can you describe for me, and this is in your capacity as the person most qualified to testify on behalf of the County of Orange, that is the voice of the County of Orange, explain to me briefly what CWS CMS is.
CWS CMS is a statewide database that has all information that pertain to child welfare service practice. So anything from contacts to referrals to placement to anything of the history of a case is inputted into the system. It's accessible in all 58 counties, so if workers in Orange County need access to information in other counties, they can access CWS CMS to get that information.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm a social worker, say up in Shasta County, and somebody's moved from Orange County or whatever, and I've got a referral coming in on them, I can actually get into the state database and look to see what, if anything, has been alleged against these people in any other county in the state.
And that's correct.
Okay. And that will include detailed information about the family or the children, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, which would be the specific allegations, the resolutions of those allegations, names, addresses, last known phone numbers, things like that.
That's correct.
Who owns that database, if you know?
Who owns? I don't know who owns it. I just know that the oversight is through the California Department of Social Services.
Do you know who maintains the database?
I don't.
Okay. But we do know that social workers for the various counties in the state, they input data into that database.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know whether or not the juvenile courts have access to that database?
Juvenile courts do have access to that database.
Okay. How do you know that?
For example, our county council is an example of who can have access to CWCMS.
Okay. You understand, though, that county council is not a part of the court system. They're attorneys.
Then yes. Then I don't know if the court services personnel have access, direct access to CWCMS.
As part of your training that you administer to your social workers, do you train them that the paper reports, like their petitions, their court reports, their detention reports, juris dispo reports, those sorts of reports, those are the records that the court has at its disposal?
That's correct.
Okay, and those records are the records that the court relies on in making its various decisions?
That's correct.
Okay. You don't train your social workers that the court has independent direct access to the raw data in the CMS system, correct?
No, that's correct.
Is the reason that you don't train your social workers that the court has direct independent access to that raw data, is the reason for that training because the court doesn't have independent access to that raw data?
To my knowledge, that's correct.
Okay. So essentially what we have when we're looking at the juvenile case court file would be information provided by the social worker on a particular case to the judge or the court in paper form.
That's correct.
Okay. And is it well, let me ask you this, do you train your social workers that the juvenile court case file, that is the documents that your agency files with the juvenile court, that those are the records of the child that are confidential?
That's correct.
Okay. When we go back and talk about the database, the CMS database, there's a lot of information in there that goes out to other agencies besides the court, correct?
Other agencies within, I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me see if I can help you a little bit here. Getting this a little bit out of order, but that's okay. I'm going to show you what we will mark as exhibit number 3 to your deposition. That's in the pile of documents I gave you probably halfway down. Are you familiar with exhibit number 3? Or I guess, have you seen it before?
I'm familiar with the content, with much of the content.
Now, it was a little bit confusing to me when I got this because it looked like it might be a training document, but it also sort of had the appearance of a policy, except that it has specific steps to follow. So I'm wondering, is this a training document, or is this a policy, or is it sort of a merger of both?
This is a training document. It's got the screenshots. But to answer your question in terms of policy, it's both too. I mean, it's taken from policy.
Okay.
But this, to me, looks like a training document.
Okay. Is it a training document that you were involved in developing?
I wasn't involved in developing this, no.
Okay. Do you know what, if you look down, well, let's look at the title first. It's called Federal Reporting Navigation Tool Instructions. What are we talking about there?
Well, Culture Speculation Acts Foundation.
Let me back up a little bit. You see here where it says Orange County, and this is at the top portion of the page. It says Orange County Social Services Agency CWS CMS data entry standards. Okay, and you're the designated person to talk about training Orange County social workers in the use of the database, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's start with this. What are we talking about when we're talking about training the social workers regarding CWS CMS data entry standards?
Oh, Lax Foundation. If you know, this is a document that Linda Ross produced and will be testifying about.
See,
It's
I
data-
couldn't tell that stuff in
Well, that's a result of the broad nature of your requests, but data entry standards is specifically what Linda Ross's specialty is. This witness is not here to testify as to data entry standards.
Well, let's do this, because you've already told us it is a training document. To the extent you're able, what are we talking about here?
Well, that's a little vague. What do you mean? What are we talking about?
Do you understand what this document is?
I understand data entry standards, yes.
Okay, why don't you explain to me what your understanding of data entry standards is?
It's a uniform standard of information that's put into CWS CMS, and it's across the board consistently in all 58 counties. So that the information that is accessible in CWS CMS reaches a certain standard, and so there's standards that we put in.
Okay. And when we're talking about specifically federal reporting, do you train your social workers that it's important that the data they put into the CWS CMS database, it's important that that be accurate, because the county is required to report its statistics to the federal government in order to obtain funding?
That's correct.
Okay. And when we're talking about federal reporting, that's what we're talking about, is reporting your data to the federal government so you can get funding for your CFS program.
That's correct.
Okay. And that funding is driven in part by the number of children that are brought into the system and then the various processes that they go through.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So in essence, correct me if I'm wrong, but the federal government pays for a big piece of that, and then the state government also pays for a big piece of the CFS program operations.
That's correct.
Okay. The county pays for a small percentage, though, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now there's some terms here I didn't really understand. Maybe you can help me, maybe you can't. Let me know. Towards the bottom under notes, it says AFCARS and NYTD only applies to children who have been removed from their home and placed in out-of-home care or are aftercare ILP adults.
I can't answer that.
Well, what I'm actually going to ask you is, what does AFCARS mean, if you know?
Adoption and Foster Care Automated Reporting System?
Ah, okay. Oh yeah, it says right up there. Makes sense. Okay, and then NYTD is National Youth and Transition Database.
That's correct.
That's a federal database? Or is it state, or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, and then the AFCARS, the Adoption Foster Care Automated Reporting System, do you know if that's federal or state?
I'm not certain.
Okay. When you are administering training or developing training for your social workers regarding these federal reporting requirements, do you train them that they, in addition to inserting their data into CWS CMS, they also need to cross-report to these other two reporting systems, that is the Adoption and Foster Care Automated Reporting System and the National Youth and Transition Database?
I can't answer that specifically.
Generally, what do you train your social
We
workers?
train that all information that's inputted into CWS CMS is also a part of these other systems. But what we do train them is specifically for CWS CMS entry. So I don't recall any training of these other systems.
Okay, just so that I'm clear, you don't necessarily train them on the data entry or maintenance or any of the requirements relative to these other systems, except to the extent that it's somehow tied to CWS CMS. And
That's correct.
okay. What does it mean here? Hold on one second. Do you know what an AFCAR is? If you look on page 2, it says running the AFCARs. Do you have any idea what that's talking about, running the AFCARs?
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
It's the second page of Exhibit 3.
Okay. Running.
Well, I think that's only part of the sentence, Sean.
Well, yeah, it starts with running the AFCARs, and that's what I...
Or the NYTD nav.
Yeah, and then it has a separate description for the NYTD nav tool on the third page. What I'm concerned about right now is the AFCARs. We'll get to the NYTD tool. I'm concerned right now about the AFCARs tool. What does that mean when we're talking about running the AFCARs?
By the screenshot, how to access that particular area.
Okay, and that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be how to access the federal reporting navigation tool.
It is within CWS-CMS, so yes, I mean that would be the area where that would be, the AFCARs.
Okay, and you train your social workers about how to do that?
Yes, how to use this navigation tool to put information into those certain areas.
Do you train your social workers about what type of information they're putting into those certain areas?
We do.
Okay, and what type of information is it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure in what particular area, but each area has a certain amount of information that we train them, and it does align with the policies and procedures.
Okay. And then the same with respect to the NYTD nav tool. You also train your social workers about how to run that tool to do the federal reporting to the NYTD database?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you train them the circumstances under which they need to file a report or make a report on either of these databases, the NYTD or the AFCARs?
I'm not certain.
Okay. You're not certain if you train them? Or
Well, we do train them. I'm just not certain on the specific information that goes into these particular systems.
Okay. Are you familiar generally with the training you provide your social workers regarding these reporting requirements?
I am.
Okay. And what do you train them? What are they required to report? Just generally.
They're required to report or to enter into the CWS-CMS database. They're required to report all information about the case, whether the placement information, contact information that's made, any allegations that are made, court-related information, services that are provided, collaterals, foster parents, and other information that's gleaned from those parties are inputted into the system.
Okay, and then that's the information that you train your social workers. They are also going to be reporting to the federal government in these AFCARs and NYTD reports?
That's correct.
Okay. So essentially, just so that I'm clear, what gets reported to the federal government is all of the data related to the particular case. It's going to be the placement, the name, contact information, the allegations, services delivered, collaterals, foster parents, basically everything.
Yes.
Okay. And that goes to the federal government on both of these databases.
Yes.
Okay. We may come back to this one a little bit later, but I want to get sort of back online with where we were going in the beginning. If you look back at exhibit number 2, page 2, towards the top of the page, and just so the record's clear, exhibit number 2 is the Department of Social Services CDSS program overview. If you look at the top of the page, page 2, the second bullet point down, it says, provide state and county administrators with the information needed to administer programs and monitor and evaluate the achievement of program goals and objectives. First of all, did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. What are we talking about when we're talking, or rather, let me ask it this way, what do you train your social workers that we're talking about when we're saying that we want to provide the state and county administrators with the information they need to administer the programs?
We train on the accuracy of the information to be put into CWS CMS.
Okay, and we sort of covered that a little bit. It's important that the information in the system be accurate and reliable so that other agencies and other administrators, managers, federal government, state government, all these other people looking at the data in the database can feel confident in the quality of what's there.
That's correct.
That it's right, that it's true.
Yes.
Okay. And that's important for a whole host of reasons, including the funding of the programs from the state and federal government.
That's correct.
Okay. Then the next bullet point reads, provide state and county CWS agencies with a common database and definition of information from which to evaluate CWS. First, did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. What are we talking about there? What do you train your social workers that means?
The two things is that the common database is CWS CMS. So all information into this common database, again, to be accurate, updated, and current, so that the child welfare service agencies can evaluate and monitor the progress of the case.
Okay, and when we're talking about the agencies, we're talking about both the state DPSS agency and the county's child welfare services.
That's correct.
Okay. Am I correct that you train your social workers anyway, that the state agency that oversees CWS actually is the one that maintains the database? They have direct access to all the data in the database, and they're responsible for the actually creation, maintenance, and control of the database?
That's correct.
Okay. It's not the courts.
Right.
Okay. And the purpose behind the creation and maintenance of the CWS CMS database is to consolidate the collection and reporting of information for CWS programs pursuant to state and federal requirements, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's what you train your social workers.
That's correct.
So basically everybody knows that this CWS CMS database, the data in it, it helps them generate their reports and their filings with the court, but its purpose is to assist in the consolidation and collection of the reporting information that's required to be given to the state and federal governments to get the funding.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, it's not something that's required to be maintained by the courts.
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, the courts, I guess, would be sort of a subsidiary benefit to the system. It helps me as a social worker. If I've got all this data in there and a bunch of screens where I can punch buttons and fill out forms, it helps me do my court job more efficiently.
That's right.
Okay. But that's pretty much the extent of it to in relation to the court file, right?
That's right.
Okay. And just some basic background stuff on the CWS CMS system. It's PC operated personal computer, right?
That's correct.
And it has sort of a GUI interface, where a graphical user interface, where it comes up with windows and buttons and tabs, and I can input data and click on things to select various information that I want to print out on a report.
That's right.
You call those filters, I think?
You can filter in different areas, yes. I mean, part of the filters, maybe Linda can answer the more technical, but
Okay.
you can filter information.
Okay. So, for example, do you train your workers that if there's a specific item of information I'm looking for, like, for example, how many kids were taken into custody last year, I can run a search with a filter to get that number?
Yes, that's correct.
And I can also run a search if I have a particular social worker and I want to know, for example, how many children that social worker removed from the custody of their parents last year. I would take that social worker's ID number and I could search on that ID number in the CWS CMS system to determine how many cases she was involved in.
I am not certain on the social worker number, but there's a case number.
Okay. See if I can help you out a little bit. Well, let's start with these ones. I'll show you what we'll mark as exhibit, I believe it's number 4 to your deposition. And you've got this in your pile too. It's 00220. Have you seen this document before?
I have.
Okay, what is this?
I can, just by looking at CalWin, we want to, what we do at the hotline is we want to see if this family is involved with any type of CalWorks. So CalWin is the CalWorks database system.
Okay, and CalWorks,
that's like not Medi-Cal, but Welfare to Work.
And then when it's talking about the client index number being entered into CWS CMS, that's referring to the CalWin identification number.
Yes.
Okay. That sort of clears up a little confusion on my part. So basically what you're doing is you're keeping track in CMS, in the CMS database, specifically, at least in relation to this CalWin number, specifically you're keeping track of children that, as to whom there's been a referral made, who are also receiving public assistance through CalWorks or some other welfare program.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's just put, this was 4, right? Okay, I'll show you what we'll mark as exhibit number 5 to your deposition. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the 19-digit ID number that I was speaking about that you could put into CWS CMS to get information about a case.
Okay, and the 19-digit number, does that relate to a case in general or to a specific client?
I can't answer that. I can't. It's been a while since I've trained it, but you can pull up information. Here's what I do know. Mm-hmm. You could pull information up about the case and the client's relatives using this number.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's directly associated to the client or to the case.
Okay, and just so we sort of have a clear definition of terms, when we say client, the dependent child or the child as to whom there's been a referral made, that would be a client, right?
Right.
And then also a parent might be a client.
That's correct.
Or a caregiver might also be a client.
We would call that a collateral, but
okay.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about collaterals, those typically are going to be third parties who are not necessarily the subject of the case, but who may have information that the social workers in their investigations want to go out and obtain.
That's correct.
Okay, so basically witnesses.
Yes.
Okay. But the clients would be the child or some siblings and the parents.
That's correct.
Okay. And just so that I'm understanding correctly, and if I'm not, please absolutely let me know. When we're talking about this 19-digit number, that number is to identify the case in the CWS CMS database.
Right, yes.
Okay, so that's a CWS CMS identification number.
That's correct.
It's not a court identification number
No.
or a court case number.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have a way, and you may not know this if you don't, just tell me, is there a specific identification number also assigned to each party in a particular case? Like, for example, if we have, I don't know, 3 kids, are each of them also assigned a specific identifying number?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Do you know whether or not you train your social workers that they are able to search for a particular child's history in the CWS CMS database by using, well, let's start by this, by various means?
Yes.
Okay. One of the means is the child's name.
Correct.
Another means of conducting such a search would be if you have a social security number.
That's correct.
And then you could also do it with the specific client ID number if you know.
That's correct. That's correct. And even this 19-digit number.
Okay. We're steering away from the
Okay.
19-digit number for a moment because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a general number for the entire case, everybody involved in it.
That's correct.
Okay. What I'm looking for is more specifically, there actually are client ID numbers assigned to each of the clients identified in a case.
I don't know of individual numbers.
Okay. What did you mean when you just told me that a social worker, or that you trained social workers that they could search the database using the client ID number?
There's different ways of searching using different filters of what you just said, social security number, parents, different AKAs, different names. So there's different ways of searching in CWS CMS that you can find information about a particular client.
You're just not sure whether or not each specific person involved in one of these 19-digit case numbers gets assigned their own independent client ID number?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know who would know about that?
I believe Linda Ross may be the person
Okay.
in the technical sense.
Okay. we look back for a moment to exhibit number 2, center of the page.
Oh, 2.
Page 2 still?
Yes, we're still on page 2.
Yeah. Okay, page 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Middle of the page, there's like a big bold, not quite middle of the page, upper quadrant. There's a sort of big bold paragraph there. The next 2 sentences below that big bold paragraph, actually the second sentence, it tells us that the CWS CMS is an automated online client management database that tracks each case from initial contact through termination of services. Did I read that correctly?
That's right.
And that's what you train your social workers?
That's right.
Okay. And when we talk about initial contact through termination of services, that begins at the hotline call, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And that also would include then any follow-up investigations, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Any decisions made regarding what to do with the child, whether to detain it from its home or give family maintenance services, that sort of thing.
That's correct.
And as part of that process, let's just focus for the moment on a child where the decision has been made after a call. The decision has been made to remove that child from its home. Okay, you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you train your social workers that they are to input into the CWS CMS database, number one, the fact that they decided to detain this child?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Is there a specific window or checkbox or something that they're trained that they need to check off to indicate in the database that that decision, the decision to remove, has been made?
In CWS CMS?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what it's called?
I don't.
Okay. And then once they check off that box that indicates in the database that we've decided to remove this child from its parents, is there some place in the database where me as a social worker, where I write up the rationale for my decision?
Yes.
Is that called a decision rationale box?
I don't know. It's the narrative.
Okay.
Yeah.
But within that narrative, I'm required, you train your social workers that they're required, if they're going to remove a child from the custody of its parents, they're required to insert into some kind of dialogue box in that CWS CMS system.
That's right.
The rationale, the basis for their decision to remove the child.
That's correct.
Okay. And you also train your social workers that the information they put into that dialogue box, their decision rationale dialogue, that information is required to be truthful, honest, accurate, and complete, correct?
That's right.
And part of the reason for that is because we want the state and federal governments to be able to rely on the information when they're deciding on the funding issues.
That's correct.
Okay. That's a good point. If you were sitting in front of a computer right now, or if we were able to get you down in front of a computer right now, are you familiar enough with the system that you could actually show us where that checkbox is and where that rationale dialogue box is?
It's been a while since I've trained it, so I don't know if I could immediately go in there.
Is there someone on your staff, one of your subordinate quad S's perhaps, who would be more capable in your estimation of doing that?
Yes.
Who would that be?
Her name is Eileen.
Is that EI?
E-I-L-E-E-N Zickafus, and that's Z. Z-I-C-K-E-F-O-O-S-E.
Okay, Eileen Zickfus, and she's a quad S under your
Yes.
Under your supervision.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. She's probably not going to be very happy with you for identifying her. That's okay.
We won't show the video.
Yeah, we'll make it as painless as possible. Okay. On that screen, when we're again focusing on the circumstance under which the social worker is removing a child from the custody of its parents, we know that we're going to check a box to indicate in the database that that event is happening.
Yes.
We know that we're going to insert in a dialog box somewhere the rationale supporting the decision to remove. Right?
That's correct.
Do we also insert or check a box somewhere to indicate whether or not a warrant was obtained before removing the child? If
Yeah,
you know.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall, and it may have been fairly recently, it may not have been, I don't know, do you recall developing any training for your social workers instructing them that, we talked about this a little bit, but instructing them that they need to obtain a warrant or court order authorizing the removal of a child before they remove the child unless there's an emergency?
That is trained.
Okay. And I think that was the stuff that started like 2.5, 3 years ago.
That's
something
right.
Like that. Okay. Concurrent with that training, did you also train your social workers that they need to keep track somehow of whether or not they obtained a warrant?
That's trained also, yes.
Okay, and how do you train them to keep track of whether or not they obtained a warrant?
I don't know the specifics of, because I don't train that anymore, so I don't know the specifics of how that's trained, but I do know that is trained,
And
keeping track.
Okay, and in terms of keeping track of whether or not they obtained a warrant in a particular case, did you also train them that that is information that is also needs to be put in the CWS CMS database somewhere?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Do you know where that information, what field we would look at, if there's a checkbox, if there's a dialog box that would indicate whether or not a warrant was obtained?
I don't know specifically.
Do you know who we would talk to find out?
Linda Ross may know, I mean, she knows the system of CWS CMS, so she probably would be the best person.
Okay. But you're fairly certain as you sit here today, at least based on what you train your social workers, that Orange County does in fact keep track of whether or not a warrant was obtained prior to removing a child from the custody of its parents.
Yes.
And you also keep track of, certainly in the database, you're sure of that, the underlying rationale for the decision to remove the child without first getting a warrant.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And that's all available in the CWS CMS database.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's not a court file, that's a state CWS CMS database file.
That's correct.
been answered a couple times already.
Okay. But your answer was
Yes.
yes. I know it has. I'm sorry. It's
I'm sure I'll hear it another 5 or 6 times today.
maybe more. You never know. Let's see what else we've got here. If you look back at Exhibit 2 for a moment under the functionality heading, is it correct that the CWS CMS database has 11 functional components?
Yes.
Okay. The one we're sort of focusing on for the moment is intake, right? That's where we're going to get the call. It's going to get potentially referred to an investigator. The investigator will investigate, make a decision whether or not to remove the child, and then pass it off to the next process.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's number 1 under intake.
Right.
That's,
Yes.
that's all sort of included there, even though it may be different workers.
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct, I'm pretty sure I am, but am I correct that the discussion we just had about the checkbox when we decide to seize a child and the decision for that seizure, that all falls under intake?
Yeah, I mean, that's the initial, so yes, it would fall under intake.
Okay. And I guess part of that would include client information, because obviously to know who to talk to, who to investigate, who to seize, you have to have, you have to know who it is.
That's correct.
Right, so client information would include name, last known address, location, perhaps where we can find the child, where the collateral witness is.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Number 3, service delivery. That doesn't really come into play until after an actual case is open, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that would be either family maintenance, family reunification, or some other service.
That's correct.
Okay. I think for the purposes of today, we're really just sort of focused on client information and intake.
Okay.
With respect to client information, I think we've already talked quite a bit about intake, unless there's something else you think we should cover. Okay, and we'll take a break and figure it out. But in respect to client information, what sort of information do you train your social workers that they are required to input into the CWS CMS database?
Allegations. So we begin with the it begins as a referral, and so we're looking at the allegations. We're looking at the different parties that are involved: family members, siblings, the composition of the family, who the client is, reporting party, if it's a mandated reporter, if it's a community. Figure that. So any type that is based on the allegations and the parties involved in those allegations, that's the information that is put into a narrative. We're also looking at placement information. If the child's going to be removed, is there where the placement's going to be, whether it's temporary, background checks, things like that.
Okay.
Services that are provided. We also see at this point if the family is involved with CalWorks. Because there's resources with the CalWorks and different other community resources that could be provided for this family at that time.
Okay, let's start with allegations. Is there a specific field in the graphic user interface for the CWS CMS database where I, as a social worker, would either open a dialog box or a narrative and insert the allegations sort of in like prose form?
Yes, there's the dialog box.
Okay. Is there also a checkbox where I, as the social worker, would check a box that says, for example, Welfare and Institutions Code Section 300A, B, C, D, I think E or G or J, or however many there are?
Right. I don't know if that's in CWS CMS, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. Let me ask you this, maybe it'll refresh your recollection, maybe help you out a little bit. At some point in the process, once we've gotten a referral, I've gone out, done the investigation, I've decided I'm going to detain this child from the custody of its parents. I go back to the office, I fill out everything I'm required to fill out in the CWS CMS database, and then somebody gets back into the database and generates a form called a petition. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And the petition, that's a paper form that gets filed with the court.
That's correct.
In generating that petition, I can also use the database to sort of streamline the process, right?
That's right.
Okay. And in generating that petition, the database will actually generate the form.
That's right.
Put checks in the boxes that need to be checked according to the data that's stored in the system.
That's right.
And then spit out a completed form. All I need to do is sign it, or
That's
review
right.
review it and sign it.
Correct.
Right? On that petition, do you train your social workers that the program does in fact fill out and check a box relative to the specific Welfare and Institutions Code allegation?
That's correct, yes, on the petition. Mm-hmm.
All right, so somewhere in the database, as the investigating worker, before this petition's generated, you're pretty sure I'm going to check a box somewhere for what Welfare and Institutions Code section this particular case should fall under?
Yes.
Okay, and then that's stored in the database too?
That's correct.
And that's a state record?
That's right.
It's not a court record?
No.
Okay. And is that, when I fill out that checkbox for what specific Welfare and Institutions Code section I think the case falls under, is that something that is also tied in some way to the decision to remove the child?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. You understand that in certain circumstances, I might remove the child or I might leave the child with one of the parents.
That's correct.
Okay. And some of the allegations that I have at my disposal as a social worker are more serious than others.
That's correct.
Like a 300E allegation is much more serious, perhaps, than a 300B allegation.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so in certain circumstances, I may never leave the child with a parent where we're looking at a 300E, but I might under 300B, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Is there something in the database where I indicate that I remove this child because there's a 300E allegation?
That, in my recollection, is that would be part of the narrative. That would be part of in the dialogue box.
Okay, so that might be in the decision rationale area.
Yes.
Okay. And then that would also include not just the checkbox with the specific code section, but the narrative about, you know, whatever the allegation was, my investigative efforts, what the witnesses said, that sort of thing.
That's correct, yes.
And then that would also include if there was a emergency or exigent circumstance, it would be included there as well.
That's right, yes.
Okay. And would that be, if you know, under a separate dialogue box or in the narrative?
I believe in the narrative.
Okay. And siblings. How do you train your social workers to differentiate between siblings in a multi-child case? If we have a 19-digit case number, it's got 4 or 5 kids in it, so we've got a bunch of siblings. How do you train them to differentiate between those siblings?
In terms of the
Identifying them.
I'm not certain about if each has a specific number, but again, in the case itself, you could use search filters and you could find out who the siblings are and differentiate between the alleged victim and siblings. So
it is possible to section them out and differentiate them.
it is, yes.
Okay.
It is.
And then, am I also correct that in a multi-sibling situation where the decision has been made to seize or detain or remove, however you want to put it, one of the children from the custody of the parents, frequently all the other kids are also detained?
That happens, yes.
Okay. When those other kids are detained, do we go through the same process in inserting that data into the CMS system? Do I check a box that says I'm detaining these kids, this is why, and put all that information in?
Yes.
Okay, so there should be separate
Yes.
data entry exercises for each child.
That's correct.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with this oversight committee that governs the CWS CMS system?
I'm not. Can you tell me what page is
Yeah,
it?
if you look at the bottom of
Yeah,
page
governance.
2 of Exhibit 2, under the bold caption governance, it says an oversight committee governs the CWS CMS. The CWS CMS Oversight Committee is comprised of representatives from the following organizations: 8 members selected by the president of the County Welfare Directors Association, that's CWDA,
Yes.
with the concurrence of the CWDA Executive Committee, and then it goes on and on into the next page. Do you know anything about this oversight committee?
I'm not familiar with it.
That's not a not familiar with it at all?
I am. I do know that, like Linda Ross, people that are involved with CWS CMS as systems would be more apt to give you an answer on the oversight.
Okay. Are you a member of the CWDA?
I'm not.
Okay. Do you know what the CWDA is?
Yes, it's the County Welfare Directors Association. So all county directors are part of the CWDA
In all counties?
in all counties.
Okay.
Sean, we've been going about an hour and 20
Have we?
minutes. You
I'm
wanna
sorry.
take a break? That's all
Yeah,
right.
we can take a break. That's fine.
Okay, we are going off the record. This is the end of disc number 1. The time is 11:22. We are going back on the record. This is the beginning of disc number 2. The time is 11:39.
Okay, I'm going to show you, I think we're on exhibit number 6, right? Show you what we'll mark as exhibit number 6 to your deposition. It's wait, I'm sorry. It's a document titled CWS CMS Overview Workshop. You familiar with this document?
Yes.
Okay, am I correct that this particular document, it's the first page of a multi-page document, am I correct that this is representative, I guess, essentially of the training that you're giving your trainers who are going to train the social workers?
Yes, this is a lesson plan. So-
Lesson plan, okay. So it's a lesson plan that you provide to your trainers?
Yes.
And as part of this lesson plan, you're letting them know that all the handouts for the training, the email announcements, the training partner requests, and PowerPoints are on a flash drive, with the exception of the CWS CMS Quick Reference Guide, right?
Yes, that's right.
Did you produce that flash drive to us?
Well, the only thing, all the material that we produced is right there. Everything else we couldn't find in files or anything like that. So the hard copy came off the flash drive or in the files. This looks like an older lesson plan. I mean, it was last revised in 2010. I don't know if I believe there's more current information that Eileen, who trains it now, may have.
Okay. Do you still follow the same process, though? And correct me if I'm wrong, but from this, it looks like what happened is the group of social workers that are going to come take the training, they each get provided with a flash drive that has all this information on it, and then they're going to do something with that flash drive. Do you still follow that same process?
The trainer's the only one that has the flash drive.
Okay. But still, even today, the trainer still gets the flash drive?
Yeah, actually on the flash drive, there's only two things there. There's the jungle overview objectives and there's the word tools menu. So those were two specific things that were on that flash drive to be shown in this particular class. The trainer has their own flash drives or has their access to updated material, but it's not from this flash drive.
Okay. Well, let's focus just on this flash drive for the moment then. It says all handouts, email announcements, training partner requests, and PowerPoints. So we know that there's more than just one or two documents on this flash drive, right?
That's correct.
Okay. What are we talking about when we say training partner requests?
Trainer Partner is our learning management system. So trainers are to put in the code, the title, the class into Trainer Partner so that when the participants are enrolled, they get credit.
Okay, so Training Partner is another database that you guys operate to keep track of the particular training that each social worker has taken.
That's correct.
Okay. And each social worker, correct me if I am wrong, is assigned a discrete number, an identifying number, is that right?
Not each social worker, each class is
Okay.
each class.
Okay, and then probably for the social workers to keep track, you just use their names or whatever.
They can go into Trainer Partner and enroll themselves, or we can enroll them.
Okay. And are they required to sign like a sign-in sheet or something to prove that they actually attended the training?
Yes.
Is that also kept track of in Training Partner?
Their enrollment status is yes.
I guess it'd be more their completion status.
Their completion, that's correct.
so they enroll first through Training Partner.
Yes.
They go take the class, they sign in a sign-in sheet somewhere, and then somebody after they've completed the class will go into Training Partner and put some kind of indication that this particular worker has completed this training.
That's correct.
Okay. And are you able to go into Training Partner, if you know, and essentially sort by class to figure out which social workers have taken which particular classes?
We can.
Okay. So for example, if we wanted to know which social workers in your agency received the warrant training that we were talking about earlier in the day, you would be able to run that search and tell us.
That's correct.
Okay. Would you also be able to tell us when it was that they took that training?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have some way of generating a list of the different trainings? Back that up, scratch that. Let me ask you this way. Do you guys keep track of, and this might be something you do in Training Partner, I don't know, do you keep track of all of the trainings that have been administered to your social workers over a period of time?
We do keep track. It is in Trainer Partner. There are some trainings that are done in-house in CFS that we don't know, but it's more in-house trainings. But every training that's been inputted in Trainer Partner is recorded and can be pulled up.
Okay, and how far back does that go? When did you guys first start using Training Partner?
2004.
So for example, if I wanted to see if some warrant training, as a good example, had been administered to workers between 2004 and today, you could run that filter and search in Training Partner?
That's correct.
And that would generate a total number for us, plus it would give us the identification of each social worker that attended the particular warrant training, correct?
I believe, let me see, there's a couple things in terms of how the reports are generated. A particular worker, you can see the transcript of a particular worker. And yes, there are reports that can be pulled in terms of listing the workers that have attended a particular class.
Okay. Now, with respect to this training, can I see your note real quick? With respect to the training, and focus just for the moment on this training, actually let's focus for the moment on your unit, your
Yes.
training and development unit. And I think, but correct me if I'm wrong on this again, that what you've told us so far is that your unit is responsible for developing and implementing the training that's provided to Orange County social workers. Is that correct so far?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Other than training developed and administered by your unit, are there any other ways that social workers get training from the Orange County Department of Social Services relative to the jobs that they do?
There are other training entities outside of training and career development, yes.
What are those entities?
Public Child Welfare Training Academy is one.
Is that the one down in Oceanside?
Yes. Was in Oceanside. It's down on the campus of SDSU now. Alvarado. PCWTA is the acronym of that. So.
Any others?
That's our main child welfare training, regional training academy that they attend training, but there's also other conferences and trainings that they can attend. Some are provided by our healthcare agency. Some are provided by UC Davis when it comes to management and supervision. So there's other entities that provide training.
Okay, on these other entities that provide training, you said that the social workers can or may take that additional training.
Yes.
It's not training they're required by Orange County to take. It's training that at their election they can go to these other entities to get further training, right?
That's correct. PCWTA, though, it is a requirement. The core class, what we call the core classes, and that's for new workers are required to take the core curriculum.
Okay, so as far as requirements are concerned, only new incoming workers are required to have gone through the PCWTA core classes before they're given a work or caseload by Orange County?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And whether or not they've taken those core classes, is that something that you keep track of in Training Partner?
We do, yes.
Okay, so that would be in Training Partner.
Yes.
And what about these other trainings that the social workers aren't required to take, but that they may take from these other agencies and entities? Are those trainings also reported in some way in Training Partner?
Yes.
Okay. So if I want to know, regardless of the source of the training,
Yes.
if I want to know what training a particular social worker has had, I can go look at Training Partner.
Yes. Anything that has been inputted into Training Partner as a course or as a training, whether it's from other entities, can be pulled up in Training Partner.
Okay. And generally speaking, if it's not in Training Partner, can I have a level of confidence that it didn't happen?
Training Partner is our record, our system of record.
Yeah, your database.
Our database. So, but there are trainings that social workers do attend that aren't in Training Partner.
But those are the trainings that they can do at their election. They're not required
That's
trainings.
right. That's correct. Yes.
So if I'm looking for trainings that the county required a particular worker to take,
Yes.
if it's not in Training Partner, it didn't happen.
That's right.
Okay. And as far as development of required trainings other than the core classes they have to take from PCWTA, required trainings, those are developed by your training and development unit, correct?
Yes. And so there's two trainings a new worker has to take. One is through our Public Trial Order Training Academy. That is the statewide core training. And they have to take that training within 2 years of their hire date.
2 years prior to hire or within 2 years?
Within 2 years.
So either direction, before or after hire.
Right. So after hire, they have 2 years to complete the core. In the meantime, though, Orange County, we require them to go through what we call an induction training. That's social worker induction training, or also known as SWIT, S-W-I-T. And core and SWIT are trained simultaneously.
Okay, so they may be attending PCWA or PCWTA core training down at San Diego State at the same time they're doing your SWIT training.
Actually, we have PCWTA come up to Orange County and provide the training for us.
Okay. All right, going back to the original question, other than the PCWTA training, if we're looking just at trainings that social workers are required by the County of Orange to take, those required trainings are developed by your unit in the training and development.
Trainings outside of PCWTA and the requirements are developed in collaboration through our unit, yes.
Okay. And again, we're just focusing on required trainings, not elective trainings.
That's correct.
But other than your unit, in collaboration with whoever you might collaborate with, but other than your unit and the PCWTA core training, there's no other entity we would talk to about the development or existence of required trainings.
That's correct.
Okay. So if you guys don't have it and it's not in PCWTA, as far as requirements go, it doesn't exist.
That's right.
Okay. I think we might have tangentially touched on this a little bit earlier but just to get a little more detail on it. You talked a little bit earlier about how how policy influences training, right?
Correct, yes.
Am I correct that, because of the influence policy has on training, that when there is a new policy that's promulgated or created by Orange County, your department then would get that policy and be responsible for developing the training on that particular policy?
Yes, we would, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, for example, if we just use the warrant issue as an example again, just for convenience, if the county issued a new warrant policy, for example, a policy actually requiring social workers to obtain a warrant before they seize a child under circumstances where there's no emergency, that's a policy that then your unit would get and be responsible for developing the training on.
That's correct, but we would work in that particular situation, we worked with Carolyn Frost, and Carolyn is the one that actually trained on the warrants.
Okay, and that was the policy we were talking about, I think, a little earlier, that as far as you understand it, first came into effect 2.5 or so years ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And other than that particular warrant policy, you aren't aware of any others that came into effect prior to that one, are you?
I'm not, no.
And you're also not aware of any particular training that was developed or implemented for your social workers prior to that policy that came into effect about 2.5 years ago?
I'm not aware.
Okay. Going back to the CWS CMS database for a little bit, the social workers, they can't just get into the database without signing in, right?
That's correct.
They have to have a password or something.
That's right.
Who issues those passwords?
Our department issues login credentials. It's Children and Family Services, IT department that issues your login credential for CWS-CMS.
Do you know if there's a specific person assigned who their task in life is to issue these login credentials?
I would say that Linda Ross would probably be the best person to ask who
that is.
Mm-hmm.
Does the person issuing these login credentials, do they have to have any, if you know, you may not know, do they have to have any special status or clearance, something like that, to issue these login credentials?
To my knowledge, they don't.
Okay. So it could just be some IT guy.
Yeah, your support IT guy.
Okay. And that changes over time, right? I mean, people come and go, and
certainly
the same IT guy that was there last month may not be the same IT guy that comes out this month.
Sometimes that happens, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know, or can you give me an estimate, might be the better way to phrase the question. Can you give me an estimate of how many people with your agency, with Orange County, actually have authorization or authorized access to the CWS CMS database?
Today?
Yeah. Sure.
I can't, because there's, I would, my estimate,
Sure.
and I'm looking at, from management to supervisor to social worker level, best guess is 600.
600. Okay, and those 600 people, that would include the social worker. That would, and social, what do you guys call them? Do you call them CSWs or?
Yeah, for us, they're senior social workers.
Senior social workers.
Yes.
So SSW would
Yes.
be a good acronym. Every county has their different way of referring to them, so I always get confused.
That's right.
So SSWs would be like the line worker, the person who's actually going out and talking to witnesses and that sort of thing.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So the SSW has access to the CMS or CWS CMS database, right?
Yes, if they're not carrying cases, though, they won't have a database because maybe they're in a support unit.
Okay.
So if they're not a primary case carrying worker, or they don't have referrals or cases, then they won't have a CWS CMS account.
Okay, and when we're talking about primary and or case carrying social workers, that might be the investigative worker, it could be a services worker or a support staff who's involved in administering services to the particular client?
That's correct, and that's secondary workers, and they have access to CWS, but they don't have they are not carrying cases.
Right, right. And your estimate is if we're including the support staff, the SSWs, their supervisors, that's going to be about 600 people.
Yes, and my calculation is I'm thinking of senior social workers in support roles, senior social workers, and supervisors, and even some managers. So it would
include management.
Yeah. Anyone that has access to CWS CMS for a particular reason, that would be in the number, in the total figure.
Do you have access to CWS CMS?
I don't.
Okay. Does anybody, any of your subordinates, have access to CWS CMS?
I believe Eileen Zickerfuss, she's my trainer, so she would have access.
Okay.
As a training. So I mean, she's not carrying cases, but she can have access and go into a live.
Okay. And going back and looking for a moment at, where is it? Exhibit number 2. And if you look at page 2, and it's the second bullet point towards the top of page 2. That's the one that says, provide state and county administrators with the information needed to administer programs and monitor and evaluate the achievement of program goals and objectives. I think you told me earlier that you train your social workers, that is one of the purposes of the CWS CMS system, right?
Yes.
Am I correct, if you're training your social workers, that part of the purpose of the system is to provide state and county administrators with the information they need to administer the programs and monitor, what's going on, evaluate what's going on with the program, that those county administrators and state representatives also have access to the data?
Yes.
Okay, and you train your social workers that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know which particular county administrators have access or authorized access to the CWS CMS database for purposes of administering programs, monitoring, and evaluating the achievement of program goals and objectives?
I don't.
Okay. Do you know who would know that?
Linda Ross.
Linda. And in that 600-person number that you gave me, were you sort of including those county administrators and management personnel?
Yes, I mean, it was everyone that I would think of that has access in one way or the other to CWS CMS,
Okay.
which would include administrators.
Okay, and that would also include whoever is responsible for creating and filing the reports to the federal and state governments for the funding?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, if we look back for a moment at exhibit number 3, the federal reporting navigation tool instructions. We know that somebody is responsible for reporting this data to the federal government. Right?
Yes.
Okay. You just don't know who that person, who at the county is responsible for doing that?
Linda Ross's team it would be
Okay.
the ones that report CWS CMS material.
Okay. So is it your understanding sitting here today that Linda Ross and her team would also be within that category of 600 people who have authorized access to the database?
Yes.
Okay. And part of that is because they have to report, they got to get the data somewhere.
Yes.
They have to be able to get into the database to give the statistics. The government needs to pay the money.
That's correct. And also clerical have access because they enter data into a particular social worker's case.
Oh, okay. That's something I didn't know. So I'm incorrect then, right? That the social worker goes out, does her interviews or his interviews, comes back, sits down in front of their computer and types up their narrative. The social worker doesn't do that. Somebody in clerical does that?
No, social worker does that. Clerical has certain tasks that they do, such as the foster care rates, making sure that the payments are done. So they'll go into a case and do certain tasks. But the social worker, the senior social worker, first of all, we train the senior social worker that they're responsible for all the information, regardless who puts in the data.
Okay.
There are certain people that would put in data, like public health nurse would put in the health and education passport. The senior social worker puts in all contact narratives, everything else, court-related, contact-related, resource-related. But there are certain people that are part of that case that may have access, and that puts in certain information.
Okay, and some of those other authorized or people with authorized access to the CWS CMS database would include clerical staff, public health nurses.
Yes.
Any others? How about monitors, people that provide
Yes,
monitoring?
so you'll have your social workers who monitor a visit.
Mm-hmm.
They have secondary, so they would have access, but they would be on a secondary authority. So there's different authorities within CWS-CMS, and the senior social worker has primary authority, but these other entities may have other levels of authority.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I read it in one of these trainings here somewhere, but the senior social worker can actually go in and set up and assign the different authorities for the people that are helping him or her
That's
work
correct,
on the
yes.
case.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So although those other people that are secondary may have authorized access to the data itself, they don't necessarily have the ability to access the full functionality of the system.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. It would be the senior social worker, her supervisor, the administrators responsible for administering the programs, monitoring and evaluating the programs, and reporting to the state and federal governments that would have full unfettered access.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And that's roughly 600 people.
Not full fettered, but with the 600 includes everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, the numbers will go down if you're looking at basically the people with primary or full fettered access.
Yeah, let's do that. If you can give me an estimate, people with full fettered access who work for the County of Orange, who've got, full fettered access.
Yeah, I would say that your primary senior social workers
Mm-hmm.
and their supervisors and possibly their managers. So if I'm looking at my estimate then would be half of that. So I'm thinking
About
in there
300.
250, 300.
250 to 300.
That would be considered primary or have the full fettered access.
Okay. And when we're talking about primary social workers who have access to the CWS, CMS, how many people is that roughly?
I just looked at the numbers.
You can give me an estimate. As long as we're close, it's okay.
Sure. I'm gonna again maybe 200.
And then each unit of primary social workers has a supervisor, right?
That's correct.
Do the units typically consist of between 6 and 8 senior social workers?
Yes.
Okay, so we can divide 200 by 6 and kind of get an estimation of how many supervisors have the full unfettered access?
That would probably be how I would do it.
Okay. And then managers, there's unit managers, right?
Program managers.
Program managers.
Yeah.
How many program managers are there?
20, 25.
And the program managers, they've got full unfettered access.
The ones that oversee programs with court-related programs, they would have full fettered access, yes.
Well, with court-related have full fettered access, is that?
Yeah, if their workers and their supervisors are in a court program where they're primary workers, then the manager would have full fettered access. But there are managers that are in, for instance, I'm a manager in another division, but we support CFS. I don't have full fettered access. I don't have access to CWS. So there's probably, out of the 25, there may be some managers that would not have the full fettered access.
Okay. Okay. But and they're not necessarily court related. For example, we know that a call referral may come in, we investigate it and say, oh, that's crap, I'm not going to pursue that. We close the case. That's still going to get inserted into the CWS CMS database.
That's right. That's correct. Yes, and so your hotline, that's going to be inserted in CWS CMS. So therefore, that manager would have access. That supervisor would have access.
Okay. And that
that's
program.
Slow down, let him finish his question. You're cutting off his question.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know we're trying to move through it. I'm trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, no problem.
Now there's the program directors, then there's also the, what do you call those guys? Mike Ryan.
Agency director.
Agency director. Do they have access?
Yes.
And full unfettered access.
I don't know if it's, I don't know that authority.
Well, otherwise, how would they monitor, evaluate, and administer, or make sure their subordinates were monitoring, evaluating, and administering the program goals?
Well, they would do that through what we call safe measures. Safe measures Safe Measures is a website that pulls data from CWS CMS and SDM, Structured Decision Making. Safe Measures, you can't enter anything into Safe Measures, but you can go into Safe Measures and look at everything that has been done in CWS CMS and using the SDM tools, the risk assessment tools. But it gives you kind of a thumbnail picture of what's been done.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this. This is a new database I'm not sure I knew about. Safe Measures, that's what you call the database, or the access program.
Right.
Whose program is that? Is that the county's? Is that the state? Is it some entity?
It's the county's program. So it's the county's program that we use to oversee the compliance and progress of things that are done in CWS CMS and SDM, Structured Decision Making.
Okay. And the data for Safe Measures, correct me if I'm wrong, but Safe Measures essentially just provides you a window in to look at the data in the CWS system. You can't edit.
Slow down.
Okay.
Slow down.
Thank you. I will.
You can't edit. You can't input new data. You can't delete things. You can just look at what's there.
That's right.
Okay. And does it let you look at everything that's there, or just limited things?
There's different authorities
Okay.
in that also. So.
Okay. Do you know whether, for example, Mike Ryan has full authority?
I don't know, but I don't know.
Do you know of anybody who has full authority to go in and just look at everything?
The social worker, the supervisor.
And that would be through Safe Measures, not through CMS? I mean, because they have access to CMS.
Yes,
why would they have to use Safe Measures?
Safe Measures is you could do both.
Okay.
So CWS CMS is the system of record. That's the database. That's where everything's inputted.
Okay.
So if it's not correct in CWS CMS, then it's not going to be correct in Safe Measures.
I gotcha. It's garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
Okay. Another one of those reasons we have to be really careful to be complete, honest, and accurate when we input data into CWS.
That's right.
Okay. And if we're not complete, honest, and accurate, the whole system kind of falls apart.
That's right.
Okay. Why don't we take a short little break and let us chit-chat a little bit. We might be pretty close to being done.
Okay.
What time is it anyway?
It's 12:15.
Okay to go off the record?
Yeah.
Off the record, the time is 12:13.